Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to a life skills seminar. We at Society for the Blind refer to life skills as living independently, free, and empowered. We bring these seminars to you about once a month, and it's brought to you by your various instructors. So I'm Sam Adams, an assistive tech instructor here at the Society for the Blind, and I am ever so proud and ever so nervous to bring today Andrew Leland to you. Andrew Leland is the author of a book called The Country of the Blind, and that's why you're all here, because most of you have read it at the prompting of your instructors or at the suggestion of other students. Hang on, I am making Jaws be quiet because this is driving me crazy. Okay, Andrew comes to us direct from, are you in Western Massachusetts today?
Yep. Yes,
Yay.
I am.
Is it chilly?
No, it's warming up.
Yay. Okay. He has retinitis pigmentosa, which I do too, and so do many of you. He has written a memoir about his journey as he is becoming or going blind. And it's totally a relatable memoir, something that he's been able to articulate that I haven't been able to articulate for the last 55 years. So thank you for putting all of that into words. I wanted to start with writing a memoir is a big, it takes a lot of courage. Did it, at least in my mind, it must, to just bare your soul and put it all out there. Did it? Did it take a lot of courage? Was it?
Probably. I don't know. I think thanks, Sam, for your kind words and just thanks for organizing this event. I'm really happy to be here. I don't know. It feels a little funny to say that I feel courageous. I think in part because I don't know, I come from a family of writers and it just felt like natural for my whole life to want to overshare in print or in some medium like that. And so I think I just, even if I weren't writing a book, I'm always walking around with like a tape recorder in my head. And so it felt really fun. There were difficult parts to it, in terms of writing about my relationship in particular with my wife, but on the whole, the difficult parts felt like I was so bought in on the idea that it was going to be useful for me, and then maybe as a byproduct for somebody reading the book, that like it didn't feel courageous so much as like necessary. And just like I was just sort of, I was like so bought in. It was a little bit like, was it courageous like for the train that was on tracks to go 50 miles an hour? It kind of felt like that, like I just had to do it.
Okay. Well, I'm a reader. I read everything. And so, but I don't read these blind books, generally speaking. I resist them. But I read book reviews and book reports, and I saw so many book reviews that recommended the book. So then I eventually caved and went, oh, fine, I'll read it. Fine. And so then I get through to the section where you mentioned who your grandfather was. And went, oh my God, no wonder, no one. Of course I have to read this. Your grandfather, his plays were formative in my upbringing. I saw one of his plays as a 6-year-old in dinner theater, and that was just life-changing for me. So when, wait a minute, and this guy's grandfather, and now he has RP and I have a connection to him. That was just so cool. Yeah. Yesterday we had a discussion, a book club discussion, basically about your book. It was very well attended, and people came to the group talking about how relatable the book was, how you put so many things into words that were important for sighted and non-sighted people. So I guess carrying on from the courage thing and the relatability, how conscious were you of what your audience would be when this book was done?
Yeah, that's a good
At
question.
that point?
Sorry, what was the last part?
Did you have those thoughts as you were writing the book? Who's the audience? Cited, not
Yeah.
cited, or?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think like as a writer, you both have to be extremely attuned to that question, but also sort of ignore it depending on I guess your disposition and like maybe what part of the process you're in. Because I think if you don't think at all about who the book is for, then you get into trouble, right? Because you're like only writing for a blind audience in this case, right? Or you're only and you're not explaining things in a way that a sighted reader, or conversely, like you're over explaining in a way that a blind person is just going to be like, give me a break. I know what a screen reader is. I don't need to deal with this. And so I think it's important to think about audience, but also I think if you think about it too much, you get in your own head a little bit. And for me, I think I was in a really advantageous position being low vision and sort of being somebody who like knew that I was going blind since I was a teenager, but had only sort of recently felt like that process was catching up with me. And because it put me in this sort of position of being both like there was like a sighted part of me that was like exploring blindness, and then there was also like a blind part of me that was like explaining blindness in the other direction, if that makes sense. So like I could sort of be in other words, like I could be the guide for the sighted reader who was like both in their position but also a little further ahead, and I could also sort of be like the guide for the blind person being like, yeah, I've had this experience but also like a little behind, I guess. And so I think that, that positionality is what created my relationship with the reader and with like different readers. But, a less bonkers answer to your question would be that, I knew that blind people would be interested in the book, but I also knew that my publisher didn't, wasn't just marketing it to blind readers who little did they know, most of us have access in the US anyway, like we have access to Bard and Bookshare and don't buy books anyway. Although, that we could talk about that. Still can buy books, right? I'm sure plenty of folks here are still throwing down for the
Oh,
occasional audiobook or, ebook or something, or even large print. Hey,
yeah.
all to say, it was kind of a fun challenge, I think, to try to thread the needle between a blind reader and a sighted reader. And in my work as in the past as a magazine editor, I would think about that a lot. And like I had one of my old mentors would say, like imagine your reader is, like imagine you're at a dinner party and let's say you're writing an article about blindness, and on your left is like the president of the ACB, the American Council of the Blind, and on your right is, somebody who's never met a blind person, never had one thought about blindness except for maybe like, seeing an old episode of Mr. Magoo or something, right? And like, how can you talk about blindness so that both of them are engaged? And it's not an impossible task, right? Like you can explain your terms, like you can explain what a screen reader is to, even though the president of the ACB is going to, they're using it all day, every day, but they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I like the way that he put that. And then the person who's never thought about it can be like, oh, I know what that is now. And so that was sort of the challenge. And that's how I approached it.
That kind of on the heels of that question, this is something that came up yesterday, um, in the context of thinking about your audience. At one point, you're describing the history of ACB and NFB and the conflict there. Did you, in that note, did you receive any pushback from either of those organizations saying, hey, wait a minute, you didn't characterize that right? Or,
Since the book has come out,
yeah.
uh, trying to be, let me try to be diplomatic here. Yeah, I haven't gotten any specific, like, you got this wrong. I mean, there were like a couple of things very minor, like there's a device. This is not your question, but there a funny thing that like probably the thing I got the most was I described this device called oh man, what's it called? The Opticon,
Yeah.
which uh Basically, it sounds like you know what it is, but it's like
Yeah.
have you used one, Sam?
No, I've only heard about it in the history books.
Yeah, so basically it's like see, I still am fuzzy on it. I can't even describe it right. But basically, I like really whiffed the explanation of it in the book. And then in the paperback that's coming out this summer, I got a better description of it. It's basically like it's like a tactile, it's not braille, but it's like a way of like, you can like, it was developed in like the 60s and 70s, and you can run it over a piece of print, and it gives you a sort of like real time haptic feedback of the shape of whatever's under it. So like, blind students in the 60s and 70s could like feel, like foreign language dictionaries. Like, so if you could like learn to use it and learn to read print that way, or you could look at mathematical, scientific diagrams. It was a super cool device. Anyway, that was the thing that like, and I think a blind person of a certain generation who's like going through their schooling in the US, they have a lot of fondness for that device. And so when they read that part of my book, they were like, ouch, you didn't do the Opticon right. I didn't get that in terms of like the representation of the NFB ACB history, because I think I was very, very careful about all that because I knew that people would be coming for my head if I didn't. I think that I definitely got some feedback from folks in the NFB in particular that, I didn't pull my punches. Like, it's not like anything that I wrote about wasn't in the public record already, but like, I think that they would have preferred that not to be like re-enshrined in like a popular book about
Mhm.
blindness, and felt maybe like, and also I think they couldn't tell maybe where I stood because like I'm very, very taken with a lot of NFB philosophy, but also like very, very clear in the book about some like really spectacular problems that are happening and have happened with the organization. So yeah, I got some pushback there. And I also got some pushback around some parts of the book that were, I think when you ask me about like the feeling like if it did it take courage, I think the
Yeah.
parts even more than my relationship that took courage were the parts that I kind of exposed my own internalized ableism, I guess, the parts where I'm like looking at disabled people, whether it's a blind person at the NFB picnic. I like the first time I ever went to like a NFB
Yeah.
meeting, I just sort of looked with like, real discomfort at the folks at that meeting. And it felt important to me include. And like I've gotten enough good feedback from people who are like, hardcore, like decades long members of the organized blind movement who are like, yeah, the first meeting I went to, I felt the same way. Like, these are not my people. What am I doing here? So that was really gratifying. But I still got some notes from people who are like, who do you think you are? Like, Hunter S. Thompson, just like gonzo diving into the convention and like writing about all the wacky stuff you saw in a way that is still exoticizing.
Hmm. Um, that kind of goes to the whole thing of identity, and you seem to, in your book, explore the issue of identity relative to sight loss. Uh, would you say that's accurate?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think I went into the book thinking I was going to focus on the question of identity so centrally, but it really did emerge as like my primary concern in a lot of ways, I think. Um, because I think the way that I framed it to myself was like, one of the questions that sort of was the engine for the book is like, okay, I'm definitely going blind or becoming blind or whatever, however you want to say it. And like, what is that going to mean? Not just practically, but like, as like to me as a person, like what kind of blind person will I be? And what does it mean to be blind? And like, those are all questions. I didn't really know what category those questions fit into, but in retrospect, and as I wrote, I realized they're identity questions, right? It's like
Mhm.
same question of like, what kind of man am I? Like, what does it mean to be a man? Or like, what kind of American am I? Or whatever, like, what kind of white person or what kind of Jew am I? These are all questions that are about identity. And it's like, how do I fit into this group? Who are like, what are the different options? Like, what sorts of, you know, men are there? And like, which one am I? And like, what are the stakes? And then, as a writer, it's also fun to be like, where did those come from? Like what, how did we end up with these varieties? And so that, yeah, that you're absolutely right to pick up on that.
Was was there a change in how you saw yourself from when you started the book and when you finished the book, or even to now?
Oh yeah. Yeah, big time. I mean, I think one of the big keywords that I latched onto that, from talking to people like Brian Bashin, um, who was until recently the CEO of the San Francisco Lighthouse. Um, but so many people have talked about denial as, particularly with RP, but having hung out with folks with, across the spectrum of ways you can lose vision. Um, it's a little different with folks maybe who are born blind, and I want to be careful not to just like lump everybody together because there is such a diversity of experience. But particularly with like folks who do lose vision, I think there's a sense of denial that can happen, and there's like, it's like, this is not happening, or like, it did happen, but I don't care. I'm just going to sort of ignore it. And, I was certainly much deeper in that denial when I started than I am now. And like, I have to be careful not to just be all excited that like I wrote a book and be like, yep, so like cracked that code, like no more denial, no more fear, no more grieving. I'm just like jamming with my screen reader and my cane and like everything's cool. Like I'm still definitely in it and I'm still losing vision and I'm still adjusting and adapting, and how it's like a kind of a daily practice thing rather than a thing that's like one and done and now I'm good. But that said, I'm definitely like miles away from where I was in 2018 or whatever, when I first sort of started off on the writing path.
What made you start to write this book? Why did you even pick this journey?
I mean, the easy answer, but also an honest one, is when I started using the white cane, it like broke a seal kind of that I had like allowed to grow over. It's kind of I think the seal is the denial that I was just talking about. Like, all my vision was changing and it was hitting a level that was more intrusive than it had felt in the past, even though I had already been through these milestones of like, stopping driving and stopping riding a bike and, owning a cane, but not really using it. And then like when I finally was like, okay, I'm just gonna use this thing in public because like I'm sick of like hip checking toddlers in cafes or like, like stepping on elders' feet or, tripping over fire hydrants and things. But like overnight, the white cane just transformed how people saw me and how I saw myself and how people related to me, from strangers to family members and to friends. And that was hard. But then the other thing that happened with it was like it opened up this sort of mystery. Like it was like, what is happening here? Like I got that the cane was weird and I felt it too, but like I suddenly had this like kind of burning curiosity, like what the heck is happening here? Why is this going on? And like what does it mean and where does it lead? And it's sort of like it was also one of those things where like the more I tugged on that thread, the more I was like, oh wait, there's like a big old network here that I was very hungry to explore. And so then I was like, how do you explore a big old network that is covered up in history and mystery? And oh yeah, you write a book about it. That's how you do it.
Of course, that's what a writer does.
Right.
Yeah. You write to find out what you think, who you
Yep.
are, and to learn.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And
Um,
I'll just add to that lovely comment that you just made. Another mentor of mine, the writer Dave Eggers, said something in the interview that I really love that I'll just echo, which is that like writing a book, he said something like, writing a book is like a really wonderful intellectual exercise, and I recommend it for anybody and like for everybody. And I thought that was like a really awesome sort of democratic approach to the idea of writing books. And I think it's easy for writers to be like, as a person who has accomplished the like great culturally celebrated task of a book, like let me like speak down from writer mountain. But like I think the reality is like it, yes, it takes a lot of time and effort and um, energy, but anybody can do it, I think. And you get a lot out of it. Like even if it doesn't, get published or get published in the way you necessarily want it to or think you want it to, like there is deep value in that kind of like assembling a narrative and gathering material and like you said, Sam, like figuring out what you actually think about something. So I highly recommend it to anybody.
Um, and then I lost my notes. Too many windows open. Oh, oh,
I see a fun fact in the chat from Doris
yeah,
that I'll share. Mr. Brian Bashan used to be executive director for Society for the Blind in Sacramento
he sure did.
from 2005 to 2010. I think I like knew that in the back of my head, but I definitely didn't know that when I invoked his name just now.
There you go.
Big
Wow.
shout out to Brian Bashan. He is, I talked to a zillion people for this book, but he stands out in my mind as somebody who's really just like so, I've used the word mentor many times, but like he's a very very generous and brilliant person. And he seems to make himself available to lots of folks. So I highly recommend if you are, if you're obsessed with philosophical or non-philosophical ideas about blindness, he's a good guy to talk to.
Um, in this, so our agency has a number of departments. So I'm in this section that where we offer the course skills training, but there are also a number of people who work with seniors. And then we have a low vision clinic, and a number of the members of the low vision clinic are here and present. Um, so that leads me to the whole medical thing.
Mhm.
Um, so your diagnosis came young, but not that young. And the diagnosis, well, at diagnosis time, what was your experience as far as you have RP, you're going blind? Oh, is that what it was? Or was it, yeah, I was 12 and they
Mm.
told my mom, your kid has RP, she's going to be blind in 5 years. Have a nice day, walk away.
Oh,
And
wow.
no concept of what blindness was, or that there was a spectrum or anything, and nothing. It was pretty darn cold. Um,
Wow. I'm sorry. That sounds less than ideal.
uh,
Um, yeah, I was diagnosed by a guy at the Jules Stein Institute at UCLA, and Dr. Heckenlively, who I mention only because I find that in groups like this, people tend to know these doctors who are like heavy
mhm.
hitters in the, foundation fighting blindness ecosystem. But
And I love his name.
Heckenlively, yeah, and let me tell you, he was Heckenlively. I don't know. He was fine. My memory was yeah, he definitely said like your vision will be stable for a while, and then when you hit middle age, it'll basically fall off a cliff. And you know, I was a teenager, and just like the idea of like middle age, it just felt like, well, okay, like that's fine. I guess I believe you, but I didn't, people I think expect a big emotional reaction from that memory from me, and that they expect me to tell them that I like, went by myself and, raged at the heavens. But like it didn't, I don't have any memories like that. It really just felt like that's a weird thing to learn. Like I don't even know what it means or if it's true or, I think that's the denial kind of setting back in where it was like so easy to just like it was like a big old down comforter of denial that was just available to me right there of like, sure, somebody said that like in 25 years this thing is going to happen, like whatever. And so that's why I think it kind of caught me a little off guard. Not that I was off guard because I'd been
Mhm.
experiencing it gradually for 20 years, um but when it finally did kind of hit this more recent period of like, yeah, I think I need to learn how to use a screen reader and like magnification software and canes and etc. Uh, it felt pretty new, and it wasn't something that I had sort of like mentally prepared myself for.
wasn't there a bit of relief though when you got that diagnosis that, so, yeah, okay, this is not in my head. This is not something I created. Thank you. I have a label now.
That's such a good point. Yeah, definitely. Because I did feel a little bit like Chicken Little or something. Like I'm telling you guys, like it's really hard to see at night, and they'd be like, "That's weird. I don't know what to tell you, man." Yeah. So definitely a feeling of like I'm not going crazy over here.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is, ambiguity denies us the relief that we get from finality. So carrying on with that relief. So you get relief when you have a diagnosis, but then you almost, in the book, talk about almost a longing to embrace that finality that might be out there sometime.
Yeah.
Um, and you're
Yeah.
in the ambiguity right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the other big kind of theme of the book, I think, and the other big revelation that I had, on the other side of the identity question, which is, yeah, which is like what to do with ambiguity and the realizing and kind of coming to terms with the reality that with a disease like RP, you know, the reality might be some sort of in-betweenness for a very long time, and what to do with that. And, a lot of different people who are going through something similar have a lot of different attitudes towards it. For me, I think the smart money, which is to say, like, the Brian Bashens of the world, like the people who like have been through it and who like have lived not just their own experience, but are like in the sort of like, blind ecosystem, blind economy, blind culture. The smart money says like don't cling to vision. Like don't like reject it. Like, don't you don't have to walk around with sleep shades all day long, but also like the more you can say this is here. It's not sticking around. So I'm going to learn how to do things without it. And then while I've still got it, like, sure, I'll use it, but I'm not going to like desperately cling to it, which is much easier said than done. But like, that's the sort of philosophy and the like aspiration that I reach for. And like, there are days when I'm like, and it feels, it almost becomes this like, and maybe even to a problematic degree, it becomes this kind of like moral mind game I play with myself, where I'm like, tut tut, like I have been using magnification on my phone and not the screen reader for several hours now. Like that's not good, Andrew. And I'm just like, whatever, give me a break. I'm just gonna use my eyes. And then inevitably I paid a price and I'm just like, whoops, like now my eyes are stinging and like I can't see anything at all. Why did I do that to myself? Um, but yeah, like the general attitude I'm taking is trying to like, and then that's how I'm dealing with the ambiguity. It's like, uh, the vision's going away. I'm trying not to cling to it, but it's here. And so I have to sort of like accept that too, and just live in that in between for possibly a decade or more to come, based on other folks with that RP I've talked to.
You've hit the nail on the head, and we have that probably a lot. As, but making that transition from clinging to the vision to accepting, okay, I'm going to learn to do it the other way. And how do you make that transition without hitting somebody over the head? Because my hitting people over the head is not working.
Your question is just like how do you do it sort of day in, day out?
Or what advice can you give somebody to 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 tell them stop wasting your energy on using your eyes to use that magnification?
Well, that's a key point, I think, that people don't realize, because I think, you have to be compassionate, because like I think you don't realize it because there's just like a hardwired cognitive, the clinging to vision is emotional, but it's also like cognitive. You're just like your brain is used to working that way. And so like trying to do it another way just doesn't make sense to it.
Mhm.
But what it does is it masks the reality that like you're losing a ton of efficiency. And that, there's the classic example of like somebody trying to read their email with magnification, and it's like trying to like read a highway sign with a flashlight versus like reading with a screen reader where it's like listening to talk radio at 2 times the speed, and just like which one is more efficient? Like
Yeah.
you don't need me to tell you. So yeah, I think like, just sort of getting the memo about that takes time, but like I think if you actually are sort of hard-nosed about it and like you want to get stuff done, like that's important. I mean, I gotta stop like lionizing Brian Bastion over here, but another thing he said to me that really stuck with me was it was more about O&M, but I think it kind of applies to all this stuff, which is like, he was talking about the sort of the O&M training he got under Sleep Shades, and he's like, you have to look at it as like a magnificent puzzle. And, you get lost and you might be lost, but like you have faith in your ability that you're gonna figure it out. And that idea of a magnificent puzzle, I think, is really powerful. And that's sort of, I think, what is putting gas in my tank to like be like, okay, I know how to use the screen reader this well, but I'm just gonna like, and I'm trying to get my work done, but I'm just gonna take a breath and like look up the keyboard shortcut for how to whatever, like use the virtual cursor like one more time, even though I really should have it memorized by now, and just like, realize that there's like something kind of fun about that. Like, and it's a personality thing. Like for me, like I like being a power user. And so like, before I was dealing with any assistive technology, I would like geek out about different tools I could download for my computer, and like make myself, better at my job or more efficient. And so like this has sort of become an extension of that now where I'm like geeking out about like, is NVDA better than JAWS? And,
Mhm.
and so whatever the version of it is for you, and I think like you can see blind people finding their own version of it, whether it's like, oh, this like lightweight cane, or like I really love my guide dog and exploring with my guide dog, or just like finding ways for this stuff not to feel like, the Lord has forsaken me and I have to like do this crap that is like, de facto worse than the way it used to be, to like, I really like the NFB's idea of an alternative technique and be like, okay, I guess we're like figuring out a different path here, but like that doesn't mean that the path has to always feel worse. And it could just be like this, like Brian
Audio
said,
now.
interesting puzzle.
Mute. Currently unmuted. Alt plus A.
So similarly, in terms of technology, I always say, well, why would you want to have only one way to do things when there are five? It's always
Totally.
five.
Yeah.
Did you write the book using a screen reader or both?
So when I started the book, I was not a screen reader user. And uh I basically wrote the book in 3 years, and it was over those 3 years that I became one. And so I kind of learned that as I went. And it was one of those things that I wonder if you will identify with, where when I started, I was like, I'm just doing this because it's, that's what the smart blind people told me to do, like, and I'm not actually using it, and it's sort of annoying and slowing me
Mhm.
down, but I'm just gonna like, and I'm not gonna do it during like my real work, but like, once a week or maybe once a day, I'll like do a session and just try to do it. And then really imperceptibly over the course of those 3 years, I got to the point where like now if like the screen reader crashes, or like there's like I'm in a loud environment or my headphones aren't working, I'm like, how am I going to do my work? Like I need it. And part of that is that my vision has definitely changed over those 3 years, but part of it is like back to like the highway sign with the flashlight. Like I wasn't aware of how hard I was straining before, and the screen reader kind of allowed me to relax.
Do you think you've made those cognitive changes too? What I'm thinking of is uh, go back, way back to there was a device called a type light, or there was the Blazy light back in the olden days, and it was the original Braille note takers, but the type light was a regular keyboard. There was no screen, and I was primarily a Zoom text user. I couldn't wrap my head around this thing. I could not think non-visually. Even if I couldn't read the menus, at least I could see as I was arrowing down, they were expanding and I could figure that out. But my brain couldn't do it. So do you think your brain has changed since you started the book?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, my friend John Lee Clark, who's a really wonderful poet, who's deafblind, um, he described it as like a rubber band. I mean, it's the same principle I've been talking about, where like people don't realize how much they're stretching their rubber band
Yeah.
until you relax it, and then it's like he said that some people do experience like a sudden loss of vision, or like they feel like their vision gets a lot worse when they start using something like Braille or a screen reader. But the reality is his theory is that actually it's just like once this rubber band relaxes, like it doesn't want to go back to that attenuated,
Hmm.
stretched out shape again. And it's not like you've like biologically lost photoreceptors or your retina's died. It's just like there, I think it's cognitive, like you're saying, like your brain is just like, oh wait, let's this is a lot more comfortable. Let's just wear, it's like it's like
Yeah.
you're wearing the like size 4 pants and then you like unbutton it. It's like, I guess that used to be buttoned, but like it's never getting buttoned again. Let's switch to a size 7. That's way more comfortable.
So on that whole subject of cognitive development, Braille, uh,
Hmm.
when did you start working on Braille?
Let's see. I think I started in 2018 and I did, I write about it in the book. Like I sort of had a couple false starts and then I really started, or I mean, I really got kind of up and running with the Hadley Institute in Illinois, their mail,
Yeah.
uh, like the correspondence course, which I think they still offer. And I really recommend it if anybody, I mean, I don't know,
We
does the
teach it.
society? Oh,
We
okay.
we do. But I did grade one Braille 25 years ago through
Nice.
Hadley. Yeah. But
Yeah,
then
I mean, if you've
followed up
got
with a grade
in-person
school.
instruction at the Society for the Blind, that would be great. But I couldn't find a good Braille instructor where I live, so I did that. And it was just one of those things like, like Duolingo or whatever, it's like you do 10 minutes a day, and if you do that for a week, you're not going to learn anything, but if you do it for 2 years, you will. And and it took me like 2 years to get to the end of grade two. And even then I was like, okay, now I like know the code and I can read it, but like this is not remotely fast enough to be useful for me in my workflow.
You described reading books to Oscar and him loving it. Uh, have you gone further than that? Can you read a menu and
Well,
order today?
Braille menus are like, I don't know. Some people love them. I tend to prefer to either just have somebody describe the menu to me or just use my phone. But I do read it every day. For me, it's more like I download magazines and books and stuff on a refreshable Braille display.
Yeah.
Um, and it's still super slow, but I do find that I have a different relationship with the stories when I read it in Braille than I do with if I do it with a screen reader. Which is not to say again that like the screen reader is worse, but it's just like you said, 5 different ways of doing it. And it is closer to visual reading, I would say, in terms of your relationship with the text than listening. And my, the kind of attitude that I have about it right now is like,
Mute. Currently unmuted.
um, sorry, got a classic screen reader interruption.
Yeah.
My attitude about it right now is
USA.
like if I really want to focus on a sentence that I'm writing, right now I still look at it in with Zoom text or with Microsoft
Yeah.
Magnifier, but while I'm listening to it. But that ability is not going to be around forever. And so my idea is that like I want to keep my Braille strong enough so that even if my writing is like 97% happening with NVDA, I want that 3% when I really want to like proof something or be like, does the semicolon work better there? I can like do it in Braille and like have that kind of close reading experience.
Cool. Um, what advice would you give to yourself today, that you know today that you could give to your younger self?
How much younger are we talking here?
Oh, yeah, we can pick multiple times, I guess. 19, every decade.
And this is advice about blindness.
Yes, a blindness, I mean, it's a part of the whole.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yeah, it's a tough question, eh?
yeah, yeah, it is. I guess I would say like, hmm, I don't know. I don't know what I
Okay.
would say. I mean, I don't have a lot of regrets. So it's not like soak the beans. Nothing like make sure that you leave the garage door open.
Yeah.
Uh, I guess I would say like to be patient with the process and like to try to plant the seed of that idea that like this is something that is worth ignoring, like don't let it define your life or don't let it like loom over your life like a dark cloud, but also don't deny it and don't, try to cultivate that feeling of like a light touch where like this thing is coming and I'm going to be smart about preparing, but I'm also not going to be like so obsessed about preparing that it alters all, and crowds things out. And so, yeah, I guess I would tell my younger self to try to cultivate that relationship with it.
Don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah. Well, younger me did not need to hear that lesson.
Okay. You recorded the audiobook yourself. How did you do that?
Um,
Screen
yeah, so
reader, magnification?
like I was just saying, so I'm still using Microsoft Magnifier and basically I I like I ended up this is kind of silly, but like I didn't, the book at that point, the only version that I had of it that was like the final version was like a PDF that was not the most accessible because like they had all their like, publishing formatting things on it. So I like OCR'd my own book, which just felt hilarious to me. And then and then and then like the Braille Institute in LA had just released this new typeface called like hyper legible that was designed for low vision readers to be hyper legible.
Okay.
And so like I set it in that typeface in like a giant font, and made sure that like there were no weird page breaks, like sentences weren't broken. So like it took me a while to like make this like perfect, maximum low vision friendly document. And then the type was so big that like on the screen of my laptop, basically I could have like half of a sentence at a time. But, if I was constantly scrolling, I could do it. And so I brought it into the recording studio and started reading it. And they stopped me after like one paragraph, and they were like, the engineer said, you were picking up the sound of your finger on the trackpad as you're scrolling. So don't just make sure you're not reading and scrolling at the same time. And I said, well, then I can't do this because that's how that's how it's got to happen.
Yeah.
They were like, no, it's okay. Just like pause a little bit and then keep scrolling. And I really didn't believe them. And they were like, we'll cut out the pauses. Um, and I thought it was going to sound so stilted, but they cut out the pauses because they're pros and it sounds
It
fine.
doesn't sound like it at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, and I was, my eyes do get fatigued much more quickly these days, but I think like I was so psyched to be doing it that I didn't even feel that. I mean, at the end of the day, I felt totally cashed and like basically was wearing sleep shades on my way home is how I felt. But during the thing, it was one of those like just I was so focused that it didn't feel that hard to do. I was like really excited to be doing it.
You didn't do the whole book in one day.
No, God, no, no. I think it was like 2.5 or 3 days.
Okay. Yeah. So 2.5, 3 days of being trashed at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. It
Great.
was super
Oh.
fun.
In a warped sense. Okay. Great results. We're good. We're glad with it.
Thank you.
I love it when an author reads their own book. So much, they know where to put the inflection.
Yeah, yeah. Although it's interesting, it's like it is a skill, that not every author has, and that even if
True.
they're intimate with their own writing, sometimes an author can do a disservice to their own book.
Yeah. One of the other questions somebody asked was, is the book available in other languages?
Uh, I my publisher has sold rights so far in South Korea and Russia.
Oh,
So
that's so cool.
yeah, so there's translators working on it in those two languages, and I think
So
that is the coolest thing I've
yeah,
ever heard.
when I wrote the flyer to say you were a New York Times bestseller, I'm sorry, I did read that on the internet. So
Oh, I mean, maybe it's true. I don't think it's true. I mean, it's not on the bestseller list, but who's to say what a bestseller technically is? There probably is a technical definition. I don't
okay,
know.
well, I just believe everything I read on the internet.
Yeah, sure.
Um, one of the other questions from Randy, one of our other tech instructors. How important is work-life balance to you?
Um, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is important. I've got an 11-year-old kicking around, and yeah, I mean it's really important to me to be present. I'm going to be starting a 1-year visiting teaching fellowship. That's like an hour drive away, but I'm going to be taking trains, so it's going to be longer, and
Oh, wow.
that's like 2 or 3 days a week. But
What are you
starting
teaching?
fall, I'm going to be teaching journalism, and it's been a while since I've had to have any sort of a commute. So I've been home so much, and the pandemic made our already like housebound family like that much more. And so even though I like worked so many hours on this book for several years, it was the kind of thing where like I would come downstairs and see my kid, and my wife is an English professor, so her campus is down the street, so I get to see my family a lot. And I think even in the situation next year where I'm commuting to Connecticut a couple times a week, I'll still get to see them a lot. So I feel very lucky in that regard.
Well, and I noticed though, even with this book, you seem to be doing a lot of traveling um, to do book readings and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
big
It's
deal.
exhausting, but it's super fun. And, I think they understand that this is like a special time for me, and, they're really supportive about it. And yeah, it doesn't feel out of balance at this point in any way.
Do you have another, do you have another book in the wings? Have you
Um, I
thoughts?
I would love to write another book, and and I at first had this thought that like I needed to sort of like capitalize on the momentum from the first book and like force myself to pull another proposal together and get it out and sell it and just like be writing a second book right away. And I've kind of backed off on that a little bit, in part because I don't know, like I don't know how to talk about this in a way that doesn't make me sound like a cheese ball. But like, this book, like I said, felt like I had to write it as sort of like an existential thing. Like, I need to understand my life, and so this book is going to help me understand my life in like a core way. And and there's a bunch of ideas about disability and culture and technology and language, that I find really fascinating, that I do want to write about more. But like when I kind of tried to wrap them all up into like what would make a book, it didn't have the same urgency to it for me. It felt more like maybe some of these would be cool magazine stories, but like a book, to sell a book with a commercial publisher, it needs to have that like bigger hook to it, that kind of like big, like either like big personal narrative like this one had, or like a big, like, let me explain something really important about the world to you,
That I haven't told you already.
Yes. And
Yeah.
and so I think I can see getting there, but also I think it's worth waiting until like, I don't want to wait too long, but I also don't want to like force it so that it's like a half-baked thing. And I just like there's so much else going on that so I'm looking at this
Mhm.
teaching fellowship as a chance to like hang out with some college students for a year and like write some magazine stories. And then at the end of that year, hopefully I'll be like, okay, now I'm ready. But and do some thinking in the meantime.
Well, there's also that whole thing where debut authors do great with their first book, and then I think they rush too quickly
Yeah.
to pull out the second one, and then it just flops.
The sophomore slump.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want
So
that.
no, we want the same caliber that we got the first time.
Yeah.
Uh, do you ever write no fiction, or is it always narrative nonfiction or nonfiction?
So far, aside from like a few unspeakably bad short stories from like, a long time ago, it's all been nonfiction. And I do really feel the most excited and not just comfortable, but like that sort of feels the most productive and generative to me. That kind of mode that I found with this book where there's like, it can be sort of personal and comic and feel like like a story, but also like pack a lot of research and information and reporting. Like I just love that form. There has been some interest from like people who want to make like movies or TV shows that I've talked to, and
Wow.
I feel very, it's like cool just because it's a cool thing that
Yeah.
like Hollywood is cool. People get excited, but I feel
Huh.
very skeptical of how to make a project, like how to make a version of this project into a movie or a TV show that would capture the tone that I want. Like that I work so hard on the tone of this book so that it doesn't feel like on the one hand, like a dry academic, like let me
Yeah.
explain the history of blindness to you, or on the other hand, like the tragic tale of one dad's, descent into the, land of blindness and isolation. Um, and I just feel like as soon as you start talking to like movie people, they're like, yeah, we want to make it just like that. But then they're like, but also like, can the tagline of the movie be one man's sad descent into sadness and overcoming?
Rah rah with the football coach, that
Yeah.
whole image that you give. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm even though it would be cool in a lot of ways, I don't totally understand how I would do it. And I don't feel like a tremendous motivation to do it, honestly, either.
Well, for what it's worth. So I read it twice, and I know Doris on the line here read it 3 times. So the first time I read it, I got one thing. The second time, I got a normal guy out of it. Um, so how do you make a normal guy into a movie?
Yeah.
Seinfeld did it, but I don't know. I mean, it's just you take your words, and your words are all um, putting in. You're defining so many common experiences that
Mhm.
I mean, is it you that talks about super blind guys?
Super blind guy.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. But you know what I mean by the super blind guy. You quote the super blind guys in your book all the time. Uh, but and they are your mentors. But
Yeah.
you're like the rest of us,
Yeah.
except that you have a gift of language, uh,
Hmm.
to be able to tell that story that we can all relate to. And then we can hand to our parents and children and grandchildren and say, here, this is it. Get me now.
Thank you, Sam. I mean, yeah, that's interesting, the super blind guy thing. One thing that somebody said to me when I was writing the book that really stuck with me that I don't think I totally pulled off was, I don't need to name the person, but they were like, you're talking to a lot of essentially super blind guys, like you're talking to like the the Josh Mealy, like, MacArthur Genius Grant winners, and, all these people who are like doing amazing things. But like, what about the 70% of blind people who are unemployed, or like the people who are like working sub-minimum wage jobs, or, and I did talk to a lot of folks, who would fall into that category. And I tried to write about them, but I think in the end, the book probably treated them more like statistics than I would have wanted in retrospect. Rather than, I think my time in the Colorado Center was probably the one place where that doesn't happen as much. And, where you're hanging out as a reader with like people from all walks of life who aren't the super blind guy trope. But, I think the reason for that is, if you think about like the reason I wrote the book and the sort of like the thing I needed to get from it is like I needed a, to figure out, what kind of blind person I wanted to be, right? And like to focus on the problems of blindness, or like, the unemployment rate at the expense of like, folks who are finding happy employment, or just folks who are interested in the same stuff I am, right? Like blind writers and blind thinkers and technologists and professors, like, so I think it's natural that I gravitated towards folks like that, just because that's sort of who I'm trying to model myself on.
Right. I hesitate, but I am prepared to open it up for any questions. I know we have a lot of people. Everybody's muted. This is your chance.
Dan, I got a question.
Yeah,
Earlier, you had mentioned that Andrew has a famous uncle or relative, and just for the people who haven't read the book, who is that?
Oh, my grandfather is Neil Simon, who wrote The Odd Couple and bunch of other plays and movies, sort of like, very much associated with like, Jewish comedy tradition from, 60s and 70s heyday.
Barefoot in the Park.
Barefoot in the Park, yep. Biloxi Blues, Brighton Beach Memoirs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I would like to say something if that's okay.
Yeah.
I am Jacqueline Meyer. I am one of the optometrists in our low vision clinic, and I just want to say like thank you for writing this book. I feel like with a lot of like that emotional wear that I have with patients about like talking about their blindness and stuff, this gave me a lot of words that I didn't previously have to talk to patients, but I've definitely felt with. And it's a recommendation I write to like most of well, definitely all of my RP patients, but a lot of my patients that have these progressive blinding eye diseases. And there's this statement in your book where you talk about like not being blind enough to be blind and not being but being two-sighted to be blind. And I find that like within my patients, like they like love to hear that, and they're like, you understand me, like you get it. And it's just like, thank you for the language, because it's just like, it's so profound, and it was such an amazing read, and it definitely changed the way that I practice. So thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Hi, this is Ed. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Who is this?
This is Ed Marin.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much for meeting, and thank you for this talk. I really appreciate it. I did read the book. I read it a couple of months ago, and I plan on reading it again. But my question is sort of how, and this could be open to anybody, but like I have RP, and I've been dealing with it for the last, I don't know, 20 some odd years, 20 plus years. And I didn't know I had RP when I had it. So whether things were getting dark or not, I thought just that's the way things go. But now that I'm in the latter stages of RP, what are some of the experiences that you or anybody else may have had about, let's say, sharing this type of book? Because most people, whether it's my kids, whether it's my wife, whether it's my dad, whether it's friends, they have traveled this path with me to some degree. And now I go, hey, you know what? I got a book for you to read, because now I am really lost quite a bit of eyesight. You know, I'm using a cane. I'm learning how to go ahead and use a screen reader. And how do you see that? How would you utilize a book like this? I guess that's a question to introduce or just tell people, you know, hey, now I'm really blind. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think one interesting thing about the experience is that it opens up the door to so many conversations. So like, you know, it can open up conversations about audio description and like, what would it mean if our family started to watch shows with audio description on, you know, or like questions about, you know, sex and relationships and, you know, like, or questions about race and intersectionality, you know, and like things that might never come up or but that might spark conversation. So I mean, you know, I don't have any like kind of prescriptive like, you know, please begin on page 72 and see this discussion. You know, it's more like just if it's starting a conversation, I think that that's the most important thing. And then, you know, and I think the goal is for it to, as you suggest, like to to allow to allow you to explore what blindness and this experience means as a family, and not just, I mean, I think that's one of the huge revelations that I came to also. I think like the experience of something like RP is so inward facing in so many ways. You know, you're like, this is happening to me, and like vision is so subjective, you know, like nobody can sort of see it on the outside for so long. And then it kind of it makes it very easy to not appreciate how it's affecting a partner or a child or a friend. And so I think, yeah, so I think as long as you're having a conversation, you know, this is why people have book clubs, right? Like, it's like what I wrote isn't necessarily important at all. It's more just like if it can sort of serve as like a little springboard to a conversation that could be fruitful for the folks in your life.
Thank you. Well said. I like it.
Andrew, one of the things that I thought was that my kid was the best trained human being to deal with blindness because she grew up with me.
Yeah.
And so she was the best little shopper. She learned how to go buy red wine. Mom, you want this? She couldn't pronounce any of the wines, but she knew which ones I liked. And I think she was about 6, and we're in a store, and she said, "Here, Mom, look at this," and she put it in my hand, and that's when I went, "Holy crap! How come the rest of the world doesn't operate like this?"
Yeah.
She's a rare breed.
Well, but the guide dog was in the delivery room. She grew up with it. Do you think, Andrew, that Oscar has grown with you the same way?
Oh yeah. I mean, he just got home from school, so I'm conscious of the fact that he may be listening through the door here. But yeah, I mean, I always think that, like, you know, for me certainly, and for Lily, his mom, like, you know, we went through this transition, and everything felt like very new and scary and, you know, confusing. And my sense, you know, he can fact check me on this, but my sense is that for him, because it just is what he's always known as me, and as a cane user, as somebody who's like, and also just he's been so much had a backseat view of like me writing the book too, like just of me talking about blindness constantly and thinking about it and like pointing stuff out. Like it's just sort of a natural part of his childhood, I think, in a way that does automatically train him to do just what you said. Like he'll just put something in my hand to show it to me. And in the most natural way, in a way that's, you know, more skillful than anybody else in my life, honestly.
Yeah.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, my name is Tina Gorey. I'm a little nervous. I don't want to be babbling, so I'm gonna try to ask you this question. I'm gonna ask the question about the medical. I lost my vision overnight. I went to the doctors once. They wanted to do an exploratory on the eye that has a little shadow. I asked him 2 questions. One, if you do it, am I going to lose? Is there a possibility that I can lose it? He said, yes. I said, if you do it, is there a possibility I can gain something? He said, no. Then, of course, I didn't do it. So when I was reading your book, I was noticing that when you went to the doctors, some of the doctors said, this is going to happen, you should do this, and you did certain examinations, and then you had other doctors say something different.
Yeah.
I had to hold my composure when the doctor wanted to examine me, or he wanted to do an exploratory, knowing that it wasn't going to help me. And then when I read your book, I was saying I related that because I had the doctor saying that, and it wasn't going to help. You had them do examinations on you, which I'm thinking you thought it was going to help, but one doctor said no, no, it's not going to help. They wanted you to do this. They said this was going to happen, and then at the end of it, you said at the end of it all, it's all still the same. I was
Right.
just wondering, and you continued on writing that book. Your feelings on that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the question. You know, part of me has wanted to just sort of say, like, there's no treatment. What's the point of even going at all? You know, and there are medical reasons to continue going, even
Right.
if there's not a cure for RP, like, you know, to make sure there's nothing else that comes up that could make things worse. And of course, there's also, like, I have these associated conditions that are treatable that often come up with later stages of RP. So I sort of go, but I go very grudgingly. And I think part of it is that, you know, like all the stuff that we've been talking about today, like, you know, the sort of attitude about not clinging to vision gets really shaken up when you walk into the eye clinic, you know, and because that is like the church of clinging to vision, you know, it's like their job. There's like a team of scientists who are devoted their lives to preserving vision, and more power to them, right? I'm not saying they should all quit and go work in a Braille, you know, publishing company or something. Like, it's good to preserve sight when possible, but you know, I think for folks in my position, it can be like emotionally destabilizing. And so, you know, I try to practice a level of detachment, really, and I find myself getting really angry. Like I think I'm just like in a very heightened state when I go to Boston to go to my fancy retinal specialist at Mass Eye and Ear. You know, like little things just like kind of trigger me. And so I really have to sort of go in and be like, just be cool. Like, they're doing their job. Just like smile and nod and like get through it. And that I really, it's like kind of a grin and bear it thing for me at this point.
Yeah, doctors are in the business of fixing people. And I found that if they couldn't fix you, I felt like I was there to be their emotional support because they felt like failures. So that's when I went, well, I don't need this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah. I mean, when I look at like the message boards, I see that all the time. People who are just sort of like, yeah, I stopped going 20 years ago and haven't looked back. And I imagine that'll be me soon enough.
Yeah.
Audio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Lainey. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to do this for us.
Oh, my pleasure, Lainey.
Okay, guys. 2:10. This is it. If you got nothing else.
Hi
Have a
guys, this is Jessica Gonzalez. Andrew, we spoke before. I don't know if you remember me, but I just like to say thank you for writing this book. It seems like it's for everyone. I recommended it to about a good 10 people, and then 5 of them for sure I know purchased it and
Wow.
read it. And so I look at it now like, here's a link, because it's hard for me to sit there and explain everything that that a lot of blind people are going through. Like, I I know a lot of people have questions and I can't answer everything, but what I could do is send you a link and you can read the book. And so because it explains so much, and it goes into a lot of detail that a lot of people need to hear, whether you're blind or sighted. And on the sighted side, they need to, so they can understand. Because when I was listening to the book and I had it on loudspeaker, and I noticed that my husband would come into the room and kind of quietly listen, trying to not make himself known because he doesn't want to be that kind of person like, oh, I read this book with you, but I want to be a fly on the wall, but read the book with you at the same time. But he didn't notice, I noticed. And so he pretty much got a good chunk of the book as well. And after I was done with the book, I noticed that he would treat things in a more different, more delicate way, like a more understanding way. And so I would just like to say thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that story. That's really really totally made my day to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, we're your fan club.
Andrew, are you planning on going to the National Federation of the Blind in July?
I haven't made plans yet. I feel like I should, but I haven't officially bought my tickets.
Okay.
Are you?
Yes, I am. I bought my tickets. I have my room. I have a room reserved, and I am registered and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, if I do go, I'll try to look you up. Tina, right?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for your time. This is a highlight. This is my best life skills seminar ever.
Sam, do we have time for one more question?
Yes.
I'll make it quick.
Yes.
This is Randy. I teach AT at Society for the Blind. Andrew, do you have any bucket list items?
Say more about that. What do you like? You mean before I die, before I lose my remaining retinal cells? Like, what do you mean?
Before you die. I mean, and the reason I asked that is I've always wanted to go downhill skiing. I'm legally blind. And nobody would ever go with me. And it was about 5-6 years ago, we started going up to Achieve Tahoe and doing guided downhill skiing. So that was always, it was something I always wanted to do, but never did. So is there anything, whether you still have some vision or, you don't?
Yeah. That's a good one. I only have like weird answers to this. Like, no, I mean, I'm really grateful for everything I got. And, I feel like writing a book was I think I would have said writing a book, so I did that. I don't know. Yeah, like I think I just try to not think about that. And I don't know, man. It's a good question, but you've stumped me somehow. Like there's no like specific thing like climbing this mountain. I think it's more just like trying to live a good life, and there's ways I could be living a better life right now, but that doesn't feel like the answer you're looking for. So I don't know. I just think I just want to live a good life.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's a nice ending.
It's been a highlight for me as well, Sam. This was a shot in the arm. Super, super fun to talk to everybody here.
Well, I've written to authors before, and very rarely did they ever write me back. And then when I thought, like, you have to at least ask. So,
I mean, the secret is like I have a much harder time saying no if it's blind people who are writing to me. So,
Okay.
Very, very happy to respond to the blind folks. If it's like the sighted person who's like, hey, will you talk to my, whatever class, then I'm grouchy or sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's going to cost you some money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, go find some dinner. It must be dinner time now.
Will do. Thanks so much. This is
right.
really awesome.
Thank you. Have a great day, and maybe our paths will cross.
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.